Hi, I'm Teacher Luke, and in this video, we're going to look at all the different question types on the Duolingo English test, and I'm going to give you some really useful tips to help you get the best score. So let's get started. So as you can see, there are many different question types on the Duolingo English test. Some test your reading, some test your listening, and of course your speaking and writing. And in addition, at the end of the test, you take an interview. This interview is not graded, but the university or institution you're sending your scores to can see your interview. It's really important to know that these questions can appear in any order. This is a mixed skills test. So the Duolingo English test is quite different than the IELTS or TOEFL. In the IELTS or TOEFL exams, they separate the skills. You have a listening section, a reading section, a writing section, and a speaking section. But the Duolingo English test is a mixed skills test. That means that some of these question types will test more than one skill at the same time. It also means that you might get a reading question, followed by a listening question, and then followed by another reading question, because the questions can appear in any order. So now let me go through each of these question types one by one and give you some tips on how to get the best score. And let's start with the dictation question. For the dictation question, you have to listen and type out exactly what you hear. You have 1 minute to do this, and you can listen to the sentence 3 times. So of course, dictation tests your listening skills. You have to be able to listen, understand, and type out everything you hear. But it also tests your writing skills too. You have to write out everything you hear perfectly, using correct grammar, correct spelling, and correct punctuation. Many students find this question type quite difficult, but I have a few tips for you, so look here. I have 4 really useful tips for the dictation. The first one is to make sure that you use all the replays. You have 3 replays in total. I recommend that you listen to it once fully and type out what you hear, listen to it the second time and make any changes necessary, and then listen the third time to check that you got everything correct. But be sure to listen to it 3 times. The next tip is to listen out for connected speech. The sentences that are being read will be spoken in a very natural way, and they will include connected speech. Some examples of connected speech are reduced forms. For example, the word have, when spoken in connected speech, is pronounced like have. Also, contractions are very important in connected speech. An example of a contraction is I will becomes I'll. So definitely be prepared to listen for connected speech. Before I go on, please do me a favor and hit that like button on this video. It will help me so much. My third tip is to practice on YouTube. On YouTube, you can find lots and lots of different dictation practice activities. I strongly recommend that you go onto YouTube, search for dictation, and practice writing out what you hear on those dictation videos. And the fourth tip is really essential. Be careful with your spelling and your punctuation. You will lose points if you don't use these correctly. The next question type, in my opinion, is the hardest one on this test, and it is describing a picture through speaking. For this, you have 90 seconds, and you have to describe a picture like this. I think this is really challenging because you've got to talk about this picture in a lot of detail, using a lot of useful adjectives, adverbs, and verbs correctly. And you have to do it spontaneously and for 90 seconds. 90 seconds is quite a long time to talk about a picture. But again, I do have some useful tips, so let's check them out. The first useful tip is to watch my full video on this question type. The link is below. I give you a method for answering this type of question, and I give you a sample answer and show you the picture types that often come up on this type of task. So definitely watch that, the link is below. But anyway, let me give you a few useful ideas here. You need to be able to describe the location accurately and fully, using adjectives and adverbs of place. And the third one is to describe the actions of the people or the action of the main object in the picture. This is not easy, so definitely watch my video on this task and practice a lot before you take the Duolingo English test. The third question type is read aloud. And for this, you simply have to read a sentence out loud. Sounds really easy, but it can be a bit tricky. Even though the sentences are quite short, you have to watch out for your pronunciation, your intonation, and make sure you actually read all of the words in the sentence. Again, let me show you some really useful tips. So for the read aloud, make sure that you don't read too slow, but you also don't read too fast. Too slow is not good, and too fast isn't good either. Instead, you want to use your natural pace. Second tip is to make sure that you pronounce all the syllables clearly. So be sure not to make common mistakes like pronouncing the ed at the end of words and the s at the end of words incorrectly. You should learn the pronunciation rules for this, and I have a pronunciation course video on YouTube which explains a lot of these pronunciation rules. I'll put the link below for you to go and study. And the third one is about using the punctuation in the sentences to help you know when to pause. For example, this might be the sentence. If you need help, let me know. So did you notice that I paused slightly where the comma is? The punctuation marks in English sentences are there to help you. So when you see a comma or a period, make sure you pause briefly and then you can continue the sentence. And the fourth tip is really important, and it's to make sure that you don't leave out or change the words. You will definitely lose points if you read a word incorrectly or you skip a word. Be sure not to do that. Okay, 3 done. Now let's take a look at number 4, which is yes, no vocabulary. This question type is very simple. You simply have to select the real English words. And this comes in 2 forms, the written form and also the oral form, so through listening. But essentially the question type is the same. You have to read or listen to some words and decide if it is a real English word or not. Even though this question type looks quite simple, it's really tricky because a lot of the words look very much like English words, but they're not. So how can you do this if you're not sure if a word is correct or not? Well, again, let me give you a few useful tips. So my first tip for you is to read and to listen to lots of stuff in English. Reading and listening to English content like podcasts, YouTube, or reading novels or newspapers is the best way to increase your vocabulary. To prepare for this test correctly, I highly recommend that you read and listen to as much stuff as you can. The second useful tip is to use some useful vocabulary lists. There are many online, and in the description box below I've linked a very useful one. The one in the description comes from the Oxford Dictionary, and it's for intermediate to advanced vocabulary. My third tip is for you to study prefixes and suffixes. Studying prefixes and suffixes will surely help you expand your vocabulary. And the fourth tip is for you to only select the words you know. Don't select words you don't know by guessing, because all of the words look like English words, but some of them are not, and you can't guess that if you don't know. So a useful tip is to only select the words you know. Don't try to guess. Another task is called the C test, which is basically fill in the blanks. You'll get a text like this, and your job is to read and write the last part of the words that have been blanked out. This, of course, tests your reading skills, your ability to read and make a guess about the type of word that will come next. Again, this can be really tricky, but I have a few useful tips for you. My first tip for you is preparation for the test. I highly recommend that you read as much as possible, especially things like newspapers, non-fiction, or fiction novels. Reading as much as possible is the best way to prepare for this task. Okay, but on test day, here's a really useful tip. My tip for you is to always start by reading the first and last sentence in the text. This is because the first and last will mostly be kept intact. That means they will be full. If you read the first and last sentences before you start, it will help you get an idea about the topic. And once you've understood the topic, it will help you so much when it comes to typing in the missing letters, because you can already guess the type of vocabulary you need. Another tip again is to watch out for spelling, particularly spelling of really common words like there, or there. These words are very common, so they're likely to come up on the test. So make sure you know the differences between these three words. Also, just generally, you should practice spelling before you take this Duolingo English test. And my last tip for you is to make your own examples and practice with your friends. So you can easily copy and paste a paragraph from a newspaper and remove the last couple of letters from some of the words and give them to your friend to practice. Then you can ask your friend to do the same for you, and then you can practice this type of task. Similar to the describe a picture through speaking, you have to describe a picture through writing. For this, you have 1 minute to describe the picture, and the instructions say that you must write at least one sentence. Because you only have 1 minute, you can't write a full paragraph. So make sure you write one very good sentence, and if you have time, you can write more. But similar to the describe a picture through speaking, you make sure to describe the picture fully and in as much detail as you can. But remember, you only have 1 minute, so you can't do too much. Let's look at some more useful tips. So for describing a picture through writing, I recommend that you learn some phrases for the introductory statement. You might get this question type 3 or more times in the test, so it would be useful for you to learn some different introductory statements. Here are 3 really common ones. This picture shows. This image depicts. This is a photograph of. Using a variety of sentences is always encouraged in these type of proficiency tests. So if you get this question more than once, try not to use the same sentence structure each time. Number 2 is to be as descriptive as possible. You can do this by using adjectives and adverbs, and you can also do this by using complex sentences. And lastly, just like in the other writing sections, be careful for spelling and punctuation. Another question type is identify the image through speaking. This question type is really unique to the Duolingo English test. I've never seen any question type like this on any other test before. And simply, all you have to do is say what the image shows. But you only have 3 seconds to do this, so you cannot be descriptive. So you don't need to use adjectives. You just need to be very precise and say exactly what the image is. Sometimes it's easy, things like fire or cat. Other times it's a lot more specific, which can cause a lot of problems for students. So let me show you some more tips for this. Okay, some brief tips for identifying the image. Number 1 is to be as precise as possible. Number 2, you do not need to speak in a full sentence. Just say what the word is. And the third tip is something I think is very useful. If you don't know what's in the picture, you can guess, or you can use words like object, item, or equipment. So, for example, if the picture shows something like this is used for cooking, but you don't know exactly the name, you can just say object, equipment, or item. Now, of course, that won't get you a very good score, but it's better than saying nothing. A much better score would be spatula, which is precisely what this object is. So just to clarify, be as precise as possible, but if you don't know, take a guess or use words like object, item, equipment. And the last question types on the Duolingo English test are the extended speaking and extended writing. Basically, you're given a topic with some questions, and you have to speak about the question or write about the question. These are some of the hardest questions on the test because you have to speak and write accurately, spontaneously, and answer the questions that are given. This is not easy at all, but let's take a look at some tips. So I also made a full video on this showing you some tips in detail. Go to the description below and watch the video called Extended Speaking. But a simple tip is number 2, which is always to answer and expand on your answer. So if you get a question that's quite simple, answer the question in a simple way, but give reasons, examples, or more explanations about your answer. This will show Duolingo that you are able to talk or write about a topic fully. The next one, number 3, is to use transition words. Transition words are very useful because they make your speaking and writing smooth, and they signal to the reader or the listener what direction your answer is going. So be sure to use transition words. And number 4 is to look out for question triggers. Question triggers are words like have you ever, would you ever, did you? Again, in my full video, I explained all of these in a lot of detail, so please go and watch that. And that's it. Those were all of the different question types on the Duolingo English test with a few tips from me. There's also an interview at the end. I didn't cover that in this video, but I will in a different video for you. I'm also in the process of making detailed videos for each question type. I've done a couple already. You can find them in the description below. And also join my Facebook group where you can discuss the Duolingo English test with myself and other test takers. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.